but
Right. Okay, that's what I'm going to do.
just got the
Well,
alert. Good to go.
I'm really excited, Brian, to hear about your work and how you do what you do and how you got into it. And also, I want to introduce you maybe to some people in Louisville, because we have a big neuro rehab community here. And I know many people who've been diagnosed with Parkinson's that could really benefit from your ideas and methods.
That would be wonderful.
I've got some set questions here that I think I sent you. And so I'm just going to go down those one by one, and there'll be a lot of overlap probably.
Great.
And
Is this going to be put online as a video?
yes, after I edit out some of this sort of stuff.
Great. Okay.
And,
So
and
I'll refrain from drinking then during our
don't
conversation.
worry about that. I mean, I'm obviously very casual in my living room. So
all right. Okay, cool. Well, then I might take
a jolt of caffeine. Go for it for sure.
All right.
Okay. So I'll be doing the intro after we talk.
Okay.
So my first question for you, Brian, is who is your ideal patient to benefit from MedRhythms?
Well, thanks, Alice. Our ideal patient really is, we're really focused on improving walking following neurodisease and injury. So those are folks that have walking deficits, but really could be due to any sort of neuroinjury or disease. And so our first product is focused on the chronic stroke population. So these are folks that are at least 3 to 6 months post-stroke when they have chronic walking deficits living in their home. But the science supports that it could be applicable across Parkinson's disease and MS and cerebral palsy, traumatic brain injury, acute stroke as well. So really across that spectrum.
Okay. All right. That's wonderful. And can you describe just generally in a nutshell how the MedRhythms solution for working with patients?
Yeah, so we're building what we call digital therapeutics. So these are products that are evidence-based, so they go through rigorous clinical trials. They are regulated by the FDA and prescription products. And so when we think about digital therapeutics, we actually think about our products much more like even a pharmaceutical would be, except the therapeutic just happens to be delivered via software. So we're improving walking, as I mentioned. So what the product actually looks like is that we have sensors that connect to the shoe that collect clinical grade biomechanics in real time. So we get everything about stride length and symmetry and cadence, speed, etc. That data feeds into our algorithms, which are based upon a mobile device. And then we deliver music via headphones. And really, the products are based upon the neuroscience of music. So cutting edge research and how rhythm can engage the human motor system to improve walking outcomes, something that we call auditory motor entrainment. So that's the underlying mechanism of action, is using an external rhythmic cue to engage the motor system to improve walking.
That is so exciting. And so are you saying that all of the possible diseases that would lead to this intervention, they all have the sensors on the shoe? In other words, Parkinson's, stroke, MS?
Yeah, so our first product, which is for chronic stroke, has the sensors on the shoe, the mobile device, and the headphones. We are in early stages, so we're in early clinical trials on our product in Parkinson's disease and MS. So what we need to figure out as we go through our development cycle is also the usability of the product. So there were very specific reasons that were related to the stroke population of why we used sensors on the shoe. But as we think about MS and Parkinson's disease, there may be opportunities for sensors elsewhere. So maybe it's a sensor on the phone, or maybe it's a sensor on a hip, or whatever that might be. All of our clinical trials are done with our product that have sensors on the shoe, but the actual commercial version of the product might look a little bit different.
Okay. So a session of this would take place in a hospital or a rehab center?
We're actually designing the interventions to be used completely autonomously in home. So we want to be able to deliver the intervention in home without the need of a clinician present. So we've really optimized our design and sort of clinical thinking to be able to focus on that in-home use.
Wonderful. And so the patient could do it like after they've been in a rehab hospital at home by themselves going forward.
Correct. So once, particularly for our stroke survivors that we're treating, after they've gone through the rehab process, maybe inpatient, outpatient therapy, it's something that they could continue to do in their home for longer periods of time.
Wonderful. And so tell me a little bit about the headphones. Are these Bluetooth or are they wired?
So the ones that we actually ship with the product are Bluetooth headphones. We use a certain kind of bone conduction headphones, which we've received good feedback on. Again, this is sort of the design process that we've worked with end users being stroke survivors to begin with. And we've gotten really good feedback about these headphones because they actually sit in the front of the ears canal.
Okay.
So that people can actually still hear their environment because it's a walking intervention.
Yes.
So if they're walking down the street, they can still hear that. But we have built the product to be sort of agnostic to headphones because we also know that people are very particular about the headphones that they use. So people can bring wired headphones, they can bring their own headphones because I say simply, it's a music delivery device. So it can really be any headphones that somebody likes to listen to, but we supply Bluetooth headphones.
I see. Okay, so if you're supplying Bluetooth, what are they streaming the music from, the headphones?
Yeah, they stream the music from the mobile device. So for the strokes, for the kit for chronic stroke, it consists of 2 sensors that are also Bluetooth connected to the shoe, a mobile device, so looks like a phone, but it's not a phone, doesn't have any phone connections. It's just our application on the mobile device, and then Bluetooth headphones. All of that is actually hard coded to the mobile device so that when a person starts it up for the first time, they actually don't have to connect the headphones or connect the Bluetooth sensors. It's all pre-hard coded to the product. So there's no wires connecting each of the pieces, but it's all hard coded via Bluetooth.
And where does the mobile device stay during the process?
So we encourage folks to put it in their pocket, actually, to walk with it. There's a certain range, Bluetooth range of sensors, so it's got to be close-ish, but if somebody's using it in their home, they could set it on a counter or something. But we encourage people to keep it on them, but keep it in their pockets.
I think that makes a lot of sense. And so we're not talking about a phone. Is it like a little mini iPad or something?
So, it looks like a phone. It looks like an Android device, but there's no phone connection
capability.
So can't make calls. It's really kiosked just for our application.
Wonderful. Okay. And so how do you offer the patients the choice of music? What do you tell them before they go with the music?
Well, as we were building the product, it was really important for us that we could figure out a way to use user-preferred music, because user-preferred music, number one, has been shown in the research to be able to elicit greater functional results in the intervention that we do to improve walking. So that was important to us to maximize the clinical benefit. But also, it's really important for us to think about adherence. As I said, this is an in-home product, so people actually have to use it. So we want it to be engaging. We want it to be motivating.
Sure.
In fact, we want it to be fun as well. So it was really important for us to use user-preferred music. So with that, we announced recently that we partnered with Universal Music Group, which is the largest record label in the world, for access to their content. Essentially, we have access to nearly their entire catalog of music, and to use it the way that we do therapeutically in our platform. And so the way that the user gets to pick is, at the beginning, we put together genre-specific playlists. And so people get to pick whether it's R&B or Motown or classic rock, whatever that might be. And then we really have nearly an unlimited catalog of music to continue to update these playlists with, ensuring that the songs are therapeutically valuable. But that's how we get to that user-preferred nature of it.
Okay. And so, just asking as a musician also, does the music need to have a steady tempo in order for the rhythmic entrainment to be present?
Yeah, we need certain what we call beat salience, which is essentially that how strongly defined the beats are. Needs to have a certain rhythmic structure. Needs to have a certain time signature as well, which is part of what our technology does. Is ability to screen it to ensure that it has those parameters.
Like 4/4 time or 3/4?
Yeah, some sort of duple meter, like 4/4, 2/4.
6/8 even. Yeah.
6/8 even, correct.
So, but I mean, if somebody says, "Oh, I want to hear Bohemian Rhapsody," what do you say?
Yeah, I mean, Bohemian Rhapsody may be a little bit difficult, even just due to the variation of the tempo, etc.
Exactly.
We think about this really as we think about music. Really, it has to be through both an objective lens and a subjective lens. So, and in fact, the objective lens is the more important lens that we need to look at, being we know what type of music or rhythmic structure from an objective perspective, so time signature, rhythmic salience, tempo, etc., is necessary to engage the human motor system to improve those outcomes in walking. So that must be there first. Second is the subjective, meaning what we like as humans or as the users. So we can hear what the patients like or the end users like to listen to, and then ensure that it has those objective parameters. You can have music that somebody doesn't like, but has those objective parameters, and it will still work.
Right.
But you can't have a song that doesn't have those parameters that somebody likes in order to get a functional outcome.
Exactly.
So we try to get both, but it's not always possible with every single song that's ever been.
Of course.
We have a lot of end users that say love certain classical pieces. There are some classical pieces that would work great for walking, but there are certain that just aren't appropriate to be able to engage the brain the way that we want to.
Of course, like Afternoon of a Faun would not work, but
Correct.
a Sousa March might.
Sousa March may, correct.
Or even the Nutcracker, parts of the Nutcracker.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, there is a wide variety and a wide spectrum of things that could be appropriate. I mean, across genres, time ranges, eras of music, but it's not in every song can work.
Oh, absolutely not. But I mean, if you know that people want classic rock, I mean, could you mention some of the classic rock tunes that you know are effective, like We Are the Champions or something?
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the classic rock genre, most music is going to be applicable because most classic rock is very steady. It's typically in 4/4 time. So you think about that even, you look at things like, even most pop music, right? Today's pop music is in 4/4. Most classic rock, most Motown, these types of things are in these time signatures. So, I would wager to say that most of those types of popular music will be applicable to be used within. Yeah.
That is so cool. Well, what would you say is the main age range, the predominant age range you have worked with successfully?
Well, I mean, as we think about chronic stroke, so this is different phases, right? So what the research supports is that this is really based upon the neuroscience of music and what we call human perception and production, which is essentially the human brain's response to music, which is objective across 97% of the human population. So they've shown through neuroscience and neuroimaging research that everybody's brain objectively responds the same to music, regardless of age, culture, ability, or disability. So in my background as a clinician myself, as a board certified music therapist and neurologic music therapist treating patients in the hospital, I mean, I've treated patients from, early after birth to nearly end of life. And we've seen clinical responses across the board. So that's what gets us very optimistic about the potential of music as a healthcare medium, is because it's really a universal stimulus that can be used to improve outcomes. Now, if we circle that back to our products at MedRhythms, we are at first focused on the adult population.
Right.
And then when we look at stroke in particularly, I mean, that's largely an older population. I say
Right.
older being in the what we would consider sort of mid to older adults, 65 plus.
Mhm.
But really, the potential is across the board.
But currently, what is the predominant age range that
Yeah,
you
for
all use?
stroke, it's primarily 65 plus.
65 plus. Okay. So you can probably sort of predict what music they are going to request.
Yeah, I mean, you can look at that population in terms of age range and bucket it into probably 3 or 4 different genres or styles of
Right.
music that would get you in the ballpark, at least in terms of what people may like, what they may appreciate. Obviously, there's always outliers,
Right.
but
Of course.
I will never forget some of my most memorable moments of treating patients in the hospital, where you meet an 80, 85-year-old stroke survivor who says that they love Maroon 5 and Adam Levine is their favorite artist. So those outliers do exist, and we love that. And but for the most part, you can ballpark it.
Right, right. Could you give just a thumbnail sketch of one of your cases that was very effective or dramatic or something?
Mm. Yeah, and there's actually, and the one that I always like to give for an example for this is actually what I would say the case that really started it all for MedRhythms,
Mhm.
which was me treating a patient in the hospital. So if we think about just even the history of how the company came about, I was a clinician at Spaulding Rehab Hospital in Boston, which is the Harvard Medical School affiliate for neuro rehab hospitals. I was their first music therapist. So I built their music therapy program, treating primarily in stroke and brain injury patients. And we were
Mhm.
really seeing that patients were getting better faster with greater results. And we now had the neuroscience that we could not only explain how this was possible, but also how we could standardize and replicate it. So that really started planting the seed of figuring out, how do we bring this care to more people who need it? And
Yes.
very quickly after starting that program, both the demand for my services, both from the physicians, but also from patients and their family members who, as you can imagine, were saying, Brian, you helped my dad walk again. How
It's
do
a
I get more of
miracle.
this when I leave the hospital?
Yeah.
And at the time, the answer was really, there's nothing you can do. That's an
Mhm.
awful conversation to have with somebody on a
Right.
regular basis. And so really that was the seed that said, we need to figure out a way to bring this to more people. And the answer to that is technology. There's simply not enough music therapists, neurologic music therapists. I mean, clinicians in general.
Right.
There's not enough PTs in the world for the need that there is.
Right.
So we started thinking about technology. And when we really sort of, I would say that the one case that really pushed this over the edge for us, and thinking about focusing on walking, thinking about figuring out how to do this through technology, was a patient of mine whose name was George. And I actually have his video is up on our YouTube page.
Oh.
And it's a video of me treating him, doing the intervention with live music. So this was pre-technology, pre-digital therapeutic. And he had about 3 weeks of physical therapy, 5 or 6 days a week for about an hour a day. So that was, 15 to 20 sessions of physical therapy at Spaulding when I met him for the first time. And he was walking at that point when I met him. He had made some good progress since his stroke, but he had a very affected side. His right side was not moving the same way as his left side, which we call an asymmetry. So his right steps were a different size than his left steps. He was using a cane still, taking very short steps and walking at about 65 steps per minute. For some context, that's quite slow. I mean, average cadence for an adult human, it's dependent upon age and height, but generally speaking is in the 105 to 110 steps per minute. So he's walking very slowly and asymmetrically. And we started doing this intervention that's called rhythmic auditory stimulation. So it's we were using at the time live music played by me with a guitar to try to get him to walk more symmetrically and to improve his cadence or increase his speed. Over the course of one 45-minute session, and this was our first session, and we happened to actually capture this on film. And within one 45-minute session, he was able to walk without his cane for the first time post-stroke.
Wow.
His symmetry improved drastically, and he was walking about twice as fast and about 3 times the distance that he had ever walked. So
Oh
he's
my
walking about 3
goodness.
times the distance that he had walked with a cane, but he was walking without a cane with improved speed and quality. And it was really more of a, especially when you watch it, it was really this, what you would almost consider to be this miraculous response.
Right, right.
Particularly when you think about the fact that he had 3 weeks of traditional physical therapy.
Mm-hmm.
And this is not at all me saying that physical therapy is bad. I mean, physical
Oh,
therapy
no.
is wonderful, but we're using a new stimulus to engage the brain in a novel way that improves
Right.
these outcomes. And that was really the seed that planted that said, we have to do something about this to bring this to people that need it.
So was George aware in the moment of the huge progress that was being made?
Yeah, what was amazing about George, in particular, George is a very engaged, bright man, and was very engaged in his process throughout his recovery. And it was amazing to hear him talk about what it felt like to walk pre the intervention and post the intervention. He actually walked around the hospital after that, telling people that I had saved his life.
Oh, wow.
And, what an honor for me to hear that.
Yeah.
But it just demonstrates the need. And you think about, well, if you can explain his outcome via neuroscience, and you can replicate his outcome with other patients, why doesn't every single person on earth have access to this when they have some sort of neurodisease and injury?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And how long did it take to get from the case with George and the live playing the guitar to having the sensors and the more digital approach? How many years?
Yeah, years. It took years. And for a couple of reasons. Number one, when we have first started the company and thinking about scaling and getting this to more people,
Sure.
It was original that we said, well, let's hire other clinicians and start treating patients in home. And so that's how we started. We hired other neurologic music therapists to treat patients in home. We quickly realized that that was not going to reach the scale that we had dreamed of. There's simply not enough clinicians to treat the need that there is.
Right.
So we said, how do we take this to the next level? The answer is technology.
Right.
Well, to go, that's maybe an easy cognitive switch. That's not an easy technical switch.
Exactly.
And so we spent years in development of first, figuring out what the sensors would be, then training our algorithms. We call them clinical thinking algorithms. So, it's an automated system. So the data comes in from the sensors on the shoe, and then the music changes in real time based upon the data that's coming in, like a clinician would do. So we had to spend thousands of hours training the algorithm to respond like a human would. Then we have to get the clinical trials right. So we have to design clinical trials, run clinical trials. And then, the business of healthcare is challenging. So that means you then have to go through processes with the FDA, and you have to go through processes of building a product that people actually can use in home, right? So it's not just about a product that works clinically. It also needs to be able to be used in home, right? So you have to go through those processes, product design. You have to also think about, how these things may be commercialized into the future. Because for us, it was always about, this is not a research tool, right? This is something for people to use
practical
in their home.
Yes.
Then you have to think about music too, right? Which is is not, I would say, an easy process to think about. How do you get access to music to use? So, that process takes years to do.
And how did you ultimately hook up with the Universal Library people?
Yeah, we received an introduction to some of the folks at Universal a couple of years ago, actually, and began these conversations about thinking about how we might partner together, and really thinking about a true partnership here of, it's content, but also there's a lot of value that a record label brings to an organization like ours, and also a lot of value that we bring to an organization like Universal too. This is the first type of partnership of its kind in the music industry, of using music for what will become, a prescription product, which once, should we be fortunate enough to get our FDA approval, will be the world's first prescription music. So an actual music that's prescribed by a doctor, et cetera. So, there was a lot of work goes into figuring out how we might work together. Like, what
Right.
does this look like? And how do we structure a relationship that really is beneficial to both? And they've been amazing partners thus far.
Wonderful. And speaking of a prescription, is there going to be any insurance reimbursement down the road?
Well, that's something that we are actively working on at the moment, because when we think about having a product that's successful, right? When we think about our vision and what success looks like, success to me is tied much more to making sure that patients who need it have access to it,
Right.
right? Success isn't necessarily size of company or revenue goal. Success is impact, and
Exactly.
success is global impact. And fundamentally, we don't have the impact that I dream that we can have without third-party reimbursement. And so it all has always been in the plan that this becomes covered by third parties across the board. So we are actively working on that now as we're building up for commercial launch to figure out how we can best make that happen, and hopefully as soon as we can. But also one of those things that just takes time.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, I will be following that closely because that's always been a big issue for me as well. And I do know of a therapist in California, like 30 years ago. You're familiar with Belle Ruth Napperstack? She was able to get insurance reimbursement from Blue Cross Blue Shield of California for her tapes that she would give to oncology patients before they had surgery or something, that was a combination of music, sort of new age music and affirmations. And the insurance company not only said, we will cover the cost of this, but we will not cover the procedure unless you use it. Now
And
that
there
to me is
are,
the dream.
that is a dream. That is a dream. And we are seeing some cases across the country of music therapists, neurologic music therapists getting some reimbursement by insurance companies for their services on a case-by-case basis. But what we need is widespread reimbursement across geographies, across plans, across private and public insurers. That's really where the needle gets moved. And so that's what we are really driving for.
Yes, that'll be a major game changer right there that day. And
Sure
I
will.
believe it'll happen, but you just keep hanging in there and doing the next right thing.
Yeah, I mean, perhaps a bit of idealism here, but I fundamentally believe that if you have a product, call that a physical product, something, an intervention,
right,
that fundamentally changes people's lives and improves their lives in a way that is replicable, that you can demonstrate with real clinical evidence, that you can replicate with neuroscience research and explain with neuroscience research, there must be a way to get it to everybody that needs it. So while that will be hard, while there will be a lot of roadblocks, while there'll be a lot of mountains to climb, there is a path to get there. And it will take a lot of time, but I fundamentally believe at my core that there's a path to that end.
I do too, Brian. Okay, one final question. If someone in Louisville, Kentucky had a stroke this evening or had a diagnosis of Parkinson's later on today, how could they get in touch with you to benefit from your invention?
Yeah, so there's a couple of ways right now. So we are still pre-commercial at the moment because we are still pre-FDA approval. So we will be going through that process in the coming year. But right now we have a couple of different opportunities. We have what we call our product lab. And our product lab is a large study where we send our kits to potential end users, so people who might use this, and we gather usability feedback. So things about your experience setting up the product, using the product, getting the product back, et cetera. So not a clinical trial, more just general feedback about product. Right. But then we also have a robust pipeline of clinical trials that we are doing across MS, Parkinson's disease, acute stroke, et cetera.
Wonderful.
That, depending on location, people may be able to be involved with. And I hope that both of those programs, both the product lab and our clinical trials, continue to grow such that, more people can be involved with those. But we have those opportunities on our website as well for folks to take a look at.
Well, I would just love to introduce all of this to the Louisville community, because we do have a brand new neuro ICU at one of our big hospitals and several big neuro rehab hospitals, things like that. Whether or not we have neurologic music therapists in Kentucky, I'm not sure. We might.
I'm sure there's at least a few that are there that could maybe be helpful in the interim. And there's an online database for the Academy of Neurologic Music Therapy that has all the people broken out by state. But there's not many of them, which is difficult when you think about trying to reach a lot of people. But they're certainly they may be helpful in the interim.
Right. Well, when we had Barbara Wheeler here, that was wonderful. And she may have done some of that work in Louisville. I'm not sure, but Barbara Wheeler has been a huge advocate in Kentucky for music therapy. Wonderful. And actually started our program at the University of Louisville.
And for the field in general. Yeah.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, Brian. This has been wonderful. And look forward to maybe following up with you in a year or two about third-party reimbursement and everything else. And I'm going to stop the recording for now, and then I have like 2 little short questions.
Great.
Off record. Thank you so much again.
Well, thanks for having me.
Yes.